I would like to just have a brief general topic, general speech regarding the topic, and I decided with the advice with the advice of the Professor Salah Ismail to share with you a general overview regarding the ongoing research I already mentioned last time when we had the opportunity to share our ideas. The name of this research is COCO-WAR. It's an acronym regarding the communication and conservation of difficult legacy heritage monuments. This is actually part of my main focus of research. I would like to introduce myself too, even if you already introduced briefly my role here. I'm a professor of architectural restoration in Polytechnic of Turin, and I'm interested in ruins. I started my PhD and also my research regarding trying to study this topic. I mean, generally speaking, or better at the beginning, I studied and being part of archaeological expedition and excavations. Of course, focusing myself more on the conservation of this specific building. But even if the more I studied the idea of ruins, I try to open more and to embrace different kind of ruins, not just the archaeological ones, but maybe also the contemporary ones. That's why I started to study the post-war ruins. Finding out that, and this was actually quite interesting to me, that even if the theoretical framework was very, very different according in the juxtaposition between the archaeological heritage and the post-war ruins heritage or dissonant heritage or negative heritage. More technically speaking, and regarding the intervention on the surface of the matter, on the detail of the building, actually the knowledge I had regarding these archaeological ruins was actually quite interesting. So I find actually a bond between those different field of studies, because if in the cases where the stakeholders and these stakeholders decided to preserve these post-war ruins as ruins, I find out that actually my role may be maybe not important, but in a way useful, just in order not to rebuild overall the building, but to preserve the building as a ruins. As a ruin, in a ruin state. Even if this is not actually very common, I find out in many years of study several case studies of these structures. Some of them were actually preserved as ruins according to a specific plan. Overtaking maybe, or yes, overtaking the tragedy or the trauma that transformed the building into a ruin. That environment, cultural environment, theoretical environment, decided to keep the memory of the building, preserving the building as a ruin. Or in other cases, we had several case studies all around the world that are actually in a ruin state, not according to a specific plan or specific design, but just as a neglected heritage. According to this topic, a few years ago, actually, it's here. I think you can see my screen now. Oops, here maybe. I started work with different. I think you can see my screen. I try to be as brief as possible. I was involved in this national project. To be honest, this is funded by the Ministry of University and Research in Italy. So even if the funding act is a national action, this project is actually quite international project. This is the name I told you about, and this the important part. Also mentioning what we Zarkad said at the beginning, is the three university involved in the topic. Is the University of the Polytechnic of Turin, that university I'm working into, the University of Bologna, and the University Politecnica of Marche. Maybe the most interesting part, according to our speech, is this one. All of us, I mean, all the professor of the three universities, we are professor of architecture, restoration, and preservation. And this is actually quite, normally, at least as far as for the Italian rules, once you propose a project like this one, a research or scientific project, and you have apparently no multidisciplinary approach, but on the opposite, a monodisciplinary approach, normally you get no funds at all, because generally speaking, it would be better to have more competencies, more scientific fields working together. But our aim regarding this project is to present from the very beginning that actually our experience and our knowledge may be actually quite fruitful. And moreover, we are not so ambitious to solve all the problems regarding dissonant heritage or negative heritage on our own or with our knowledge regarding architectural restoration. But for sure, we will involve, and we are involving different experts all around the world. But scientifically speaking, the main topic of the research is actually connected with the preservation of memory. So it's something really close to what we are talking about every day in a classroom, in our research, in our papers, and so on. The project is actually quite, as I told you, is actually quite, those are the university involved. And I'm sorry, I would like to repeat it again. The project is actually not just about the conservation of the difficult legacy or the negative heritage, but it's also about the communication. If you just focus yourself on the title of the project, you may find out that actually there is no design there, no transformation, no preservation. We are not dealing with the design of difficult legacy. We're not dealing with the transformation of difficult legacy, but we decided right on the title, of course, we are interested in this topic, but we decided to highlight clearly that beside the conservation, which of course it's very important, the communication, it's even more important. With communication, we mean, of course, to share the awareness, the knowledge, and generally speaking, the values of these buildings. And this is actually part of the design itself. Beside what we would like to do with the buildings, keep it in a ruined state, transform it, adaptive reuse of the buildings we discussed last time. To find out the best solution for the building, to spread the values of it, of course, after the knowledge, the comprehension of the place, it's actually part of the mandatory action that we really would like to highlight too. So conservation and communication of difficult legacies. Those 8 points, even if there is a mistake, I'm sorry, I checked it out before. Those are actually the main steps of our research. I'm sorry, this is actually, I would like to speak it out clearly. This is an ongoing research. It will be over on October 2025. So I have partial results and partial data, but according to my colleagues, of course, they are aware about this speech I'm delivering. We would like to share the methodology we find out regarding this project. And besides the management of the project, which is actually an action that is quite important to take in consideration at the beginning, we define these steps or these chapters of our research, starting with the mapping of the dissonance. I mentioned this maybe last time. Mapping the dissonance meant, actually we already did it, quite finished now, to work on something like almost 200 case studies all around Europe, but worldwide. We have, of course, case studies in America and Asia, but according to our knowledge and what we may do and we can do, we map the most part of Europe and Middle East, moreover, about case studies that we may consider as part of negative heritage or dissonant heritage. And mapping, it doesn't mean just to find out on the map where they are, period, but actually to find out deeply why they be part of this map. What does it mean, this dissonant? Is it referred to religious problems or dissonance? Is it referring to ethnic dissonance or dispute between communities? Is it connected with totalitarianism legacy of the 20th century. We have many buildings in Italy. And so we find out also different premises to the dissonance. Of course, not all the buildings are the same, not just because they we deal with different countries, but also because the causes or the premises are actually quite different. This will become a general map. We will have a general GIS map, and we will publish it online. So everyone, we share the data with everyone, potentially on the fall 2025 when the project will be over. And then we move to the understanding that this value. And this is actually something that we internally were in charge. We are actually, we're not where, we are in charge of. And this is something we discussed last time together. This asked us to not just to focus on the premises of the dissonance, but to find out the best strategies to deal with the communities in order to get, from their point of view, how they perceive the building or that area. Do they perceive as a dissonant place? Did they perceive as something as a problem? And this has actually happened, or maybe internationally speaking, we have an international attention to case studies that where communities, yes, they are aware about the site, but maybe they're not super interested on the transformation of the site. Maybe they're like used with the status quo. And then I don't want to be too long, so I try to be clear. The general outcomes of the projects are actually of three kinds. The first one is actually find out handbooks in order to define strategies, glossary, and action in order to share them with everyone. Not without, of course, the outcome can't be the best choice. We are not, we really don't know what to do wherever or whatever. It's better to define, we decided to define typologies of actions or strategies and to collect them in a handbook in order to share with all the strategies, the potential strategies with everyone, in order to let everyone be able to apply a methodology on their own. Second kind of outcome is more regarding a final exhibition, a virtual exhibition that will collect all the data of the research, and this virtual exhibition will be actually virtual in order not to be linked to a specific place and so to be visited just by a few, but it will be virtual in order to let everyone be able to see or to visit the exhibition, even if they are from all over the world, potentially. And the third outcome is actually to apply these methodologies in three different case studies we selected a few months ago. One is the former house of the fascist party in Predappio in Italy. This is actually, of course, connect with totalitarianism. By the way, this is an amazing building. This picture is not maybe the best picture to give you an overall perception of the place, but this is a quite interesting and building with an important historical value, even if, generally speaking, is intended as a legacy of the fascist party. Why? Just because this village, tiny village in Predappio, is in the northwest near to Rimini, near to Ancona. I don't know if you know, near Bologna, but next to the sea coast, was actually the native village of the dictator Benito Mussolini. That's why the people perceive this place as a special place connected with fascism, even if we have many former houses, house of fascist party in Italy, and most part of them has been transformed now in several different. Second experimental lab or second case study is in Mostar in Bosnia, and we will work in Turin, but everyone will work everywhere. But anyway, this is a cemetery of the partisan in Mostar. This building is actually quite interesting because maybe Mostar is like kind of divided city between the two communities, divided by the city, but also by ethnic problem. And this place we decided to focus on this place, not just for our experience, but also because this place has been in a way attacked in 2022, where unknown people, vandals, decided to reach this cemetery, which is, by the way, in a park, so with no fence, it's quite a wide open area. They enter in it, and even if it was and it is asymmetry with tombstones. And so they decided to, with hammers and other tools, they decided to crack and destroy completely these graveyards and tombstones. And this is actually an amazing architecture of Bogdan Bogdanovic, an amazing architecture. He designed this building in the 60s. And the third case study is actually in Armenia, in Azerbaijan, and you know this part. This is the general research. Of course, this, as you see, it's actually an interesting, I guess you may be interested on this, but moreover, it's actually an international research. And that's why for me, it's quite a pleasure to be part of this pitch, because it's not just what I may potential or hypothetically give to you according to the research, but working together, I also can gain and collect more points of view regarding this research, regarding the topic of negative heritage and dissonant heritage. That's why we decided to I decided to share with you this brief research, and I hope it may be in a way useful. Of course, please count on me to the development of each one of these case studies, interview, theoretical framework, handbooks, mapping the dissonance. Here I am, and thank you so much and I hope to sum it up clearly for every one of you. Thank you so much indeed.
Thanks a lot, Doctor. Thanks a lot for these insights. Maybe we can come back if there are questions after Dr. Tammo also give us his presentation, his generous presentation. Thanks a lot.
Okay. Do you want me to deliver in Arabic or in English? I could do the Arabic. I don't mind. So just let me know.
التبطيل هو صاير في ناس يعني المعظم بيحسن يحكي عربي. الدكتور صلاح ممكن يعلق على القصة هاي.
يعني إذا بتكون العربي ما عندي مشكلة بصراحة، يعني ممكن
English, please, Professor.
Doctor, this is like prefers English.
Yes.
Okay. English it is then.
بس خليني ارجع انوه دكتور انه اللي بده عربي ممكن يروح على الخيارات، في خيار انه يروح يسمع العربي كمان، ففي خيار العربي تمام، تختار اللغه انه تكون عربي، ممكن انك تسمع اللغه الاصليه بالباك جراوند او انك ما تسمعها، فبيكون الخيار لك.
طيب.
الخيارات موجوده. Thanks a lot. Yeah, so it will be English. Okay.
It will be English it is then. Okay. Well, I approached a topic from my understanding of the negative heritage. So went through kind of defining negative heritage. I know we've got specialists in here who could define this in a different way, but for me, negative heritage, if I go to the second slides, and here, for example, it's those key elements of society or the history of societies, the kind of associated with harm, injustice, oppressions, include practices, kind of event of or symbols of, you see, discrimination, massacre, genocide, they all kind of negative, civil wars, they all kind of elements of negative heritage in here. And I've shared examples like colonism and imperialisms in here, slavery, like in the States, racism and segregation, South Africa, genocide and ethnic cleansing, Rwanda, for example. You see economic exploitations, and that will be pretty much all of Europe, pretty much 2/3 of the world during the Industrial Revolutions in here. And then I wanted to see how I would use architecture as a designer in here to deal with negative heritage, to be honest. And I thought maybe, okay, let's talk about architecture as a powerful tool in here to create, let's say, not kind of honor the negative heritage, and at the same time integrate negative heritage to become part of our presence and eliminate any negative impact of this negative heritage on future generations. But I went through how would, as an architecture designer, I would use negative heritage. I would use those sad stories let's say, you see, and then become part of the urban fabric, become part of our urban cities. Then I reached, of course, there are kind of different examples, but addressing negative heritage in architecture will become by, again, like any society or any kind of a social, let's say, comeback or response by acknowledging and remembering, by proposing reconciliation through design and architecture, and of course, restoration and sometimes, and then propose reforms through different architecture intervention like adaptive reuse, for examples. Then I went through those different kind of, you see, architecture interventions in here. Memorials and monuments could be one of the key things in here. But people think about memorials as statues. They are far more than a statue. It's the story of that's associated with the place. It's about visiting the memorial, connect with the painful past. That's the main idea of designing memorials. This kind of, you see, reflecting on that collective history of different sects of one society, for example. And the best example will be used is let's say the Jews memorials in the genocide memorials in Berlin. So the design, it's about 2,700 concrete cubics, but the way it's being placed, it's not about the number, it's about that rigid feeling of having the concrete and design it as a kind of a, you see, a maze where when you walk through it, you have that feeling of disorder, lost, pain, you see, running for your life. And that will be the final kind of moment of Jews during the genocide in Berlin, for example. And at the same time, it does give you this connecting with the past. It does remember the victims, and it does value. Do you see my screen? Yeah, okay. And then the second things will be adaptive reuse of the conflict. I mean, adaptive reuse is about, you see, honoring the past and at the same, honoring the present and value the past. It's one of the main architecture intervention nowadays, and that's when we approach a germ of the past and existing elements, either destroyed or a ruin. It doesn't need to be kind of, you see, it could be a disaster, it could be an earthquake, but it's still part of it. Could be a tsunami. The outcome in here, you've got a piece of history. You're gonna repurpose it and then give it a newer functions in here, and that by showing intervention in this building and then bringing both past and present, working all together, and at the same time is maintaining that history for the future. And the best example to share about adaptive reuse, and then you see, using the sad stories of the past to create a better and a positive future is Sarajevo train station. Partially destroyed during the Civil War, you see, but however, the adaptive reuse project was, you see, adding bits, extension, creating that parasite intervention of the project, and at the same time, maintaining some of the damage to the facade so that people can remember the Civil War and remember the falling people. And at the same time, within the landscape of the train station, there is elements of the older train station, and that was the heritage assassination, and it's linked to, you see, I would say, the first act of the First World War, when you see the assassination of Archdukes happens in Sarajevo, and that was the starting point of the First World War. And it's still there, but it's all being integrated now, landscape and building, and it's part of the present. It does tell both stories, Civil War and the Great War in 1917s. And then I move towards, you see, kind of using what we have, negative heritage, for example. If I look at the river Messika in Aleppo, that's a public space. How would I create a public space a peaceful public space that will celebrate the negative heritage, and at the same time delivering unity, healing, promoting the peace, and bringing inclusive design that will integrate or engage communities in here. And of course, other international example could be the Hiroshima Peace Memorial, for example, which is the background of my slides in here. It's a landscape, it's a public space, but there is elements of that destruction in there. But people go there to reflect, people go there to remember the devastation of the Second World War, and at the same time remember the falling civilians during that war, and learn from this by creating more of kind of a social, interactive place. And then I move towards, you see, how to use museums and cultural centers at the same times in there. So museums is not just kind of a place to visit and see an artifact. It's basically, it's the process, the walk through the journey, the story. And I've got two examples in here that I could reflect to. The Jewish Museums in Berlin, when Daniel Libeskind, as an architect, designed the whole space as a kind of, you see, you walk in, you hear stories, you hear voices, you see what's left of certain sects of the community, like shoes thrown in the floor. And then you've got the apartheid museums in Cape Town in South Africa. The whole building being designed to resembles the story of discrimination and the apartheid in that country and the segregation between the whites and black. Then going toward, you see, let's say restorations, culture centers, and then how would I use this? It is a piece, it is a landmark. I'm not kind of gonna come up about destroying such a thing. It's all about this links and connection between the past. The best examples that I would use about culture heritage in here, it's the Nouri mosques in Mosul. Pretty much what's left of the mosque, it's the key connection now between the past, because the mosque is not only a mosque, it's a landmark. The mosque is a piece of cultural, historical, architecture, religious heritage in one area. So it is pretty much part of the identity of the Mosul city. It's part of what makes the Mosul Mosuls. It's part of the urban fabric. So it's basically what's left and need to be preserved, maintained, and then it will be open for interpretation afterwards. But that's how I actually use the destruction of this to celebrate, you see, the whole journey. The creation, the building at the beginning, the design, what happens afterwards, and at the same time, the destruction that happens in the 21st century. Then I go towards, you see, designing for unity. I mean, civil wars will end up with divided society. We can't hide this. And I guess what happens in Syria in the last 3 days is a sign how divided is the society, because people will start fighting for a post on Facebook. And that's basically the outcome of civil wars for 14 or 15 years. So we need to use our negative heritage to unite the society rather than, you see, divided what's divided. So let's create shared spaces. Let's create the inclusive design. Let's the whole design being kind of driven by dialogue and understanding, you see, acknowledging what happens, admitting the mistakes from the different sects, and using them to create either a public space or a monument or the cultural center. It doesn't need to be, or you could come up with a new thing. It could be even a street that will celebrate the whole thing. And a good examples in here, let's look at, you see, designing for unity and divisions. Look at the United Nations headquarters. I know it could kind of become it's only a concrete and a glass, but the whole idea about this is resembles a ship, resembles that no matter how divided, no matter how many countries we have across the world, but it's a sign, it's a symbol of unity. We could go all walk to that place and discuss our disagreements and find a peaceful solution through dialogue rather than, again, carry on with war and findings. The final things in that comes to my mind is using one of the basics architecture principles. Symbolisms. Let's use symbolisms and find and kind of, you see, and honoring that negative heritage in here, either through forms, through materials, through space, through even kind of, you see, social intervention in here. And the best options or the best example to use is the Vietnam Veteran Memorial Wall. It's basically a granite wall that's integrated in the landscape, and people walk through this, read around 58,000 names of the fallen American soldiers in Vietnam War, and the ways that you actually polished or finished the finesse of the wall. It's a key issue as well. It's a reflective granite, so you walk down the wall, you read the name, and you see your face. So that's the social connection between as a human living now and the falling soldiers in the 50s and 60s in Vietnam, for examples. And in conclusion, I see as an architecture, I always believed every building can talk if you can speak the language. So architecture could be the path for healing in here through different intervention, to be honest. It could be only the storytelling. It could be only sharing the design concepts. And again, I refer to Daniel Libeskind in here and designing the Jews Museum in Berlin. The whole idea is about, you see, highlighting the communities or the areas, the kind of location of the community of the Jewish communities and within Berlin, and then link them all together. The story will mix the building. And again, as a designer, as an architect, teaching architecture, practicing architecture, it's all about storytelling. If you sell the people the story, then they will fall in love with the place. They will fall in love with the, you see, the sad moment, the sad story of our negative heritage. And thank you very much. And I'll stop here, stop sharing.
Thanks a lot, Doctor. It was so informative, so touching too. I hope some of these techniques will be reflected soon in Syria. Dr. Salah, would you like to? Okay. I mean, should we go to your presentation or see if there are questions first? Questions? Okay, because okay. If there are any questions, we can direct to Dr. Tammo or Dr. Mortizi. في أي أسئلة عن شيء نطرح لحد الآن حتى يكون في فاصل يعني بين الإلقاء والإلقاء.
Wissam, I have an input, please.
Yes, please, go ahead.
I would like to thank Kafa'at for Reconstruction and Emmanuel and Omar for their very much informative slides and meeting, because creating spaces that we can share knowledge for people working on the ground is a great opportunity to get a broader look into the international preservation works, let's say, that many of the Syrians don't know actually nowadays. So we really appreciate these kind of meetings, and I hope we do get monthly meetings, let's say, on updates on famous research. For example, Emmanuel, we can get updates on your research on the outcomes and on the difficulties that you might face. And also, Mr. Omar, we can get more insights from your knowledge and experience. So if I would like to sum up my input, is that when we think of the word heritage, much of us would think about culture only. So during school days, when I did a quick research on the cultural preservation of the city of Shibam in Yemen. So it was one of the restoration principles or the preservation principles of Ronald Lowcock, I guess, was that keep the buildings as they look and reinforce them to actually preserve the look and and to not renew the buildings, but rather preserve the identity of the city. So my question, let's say, or I think my point for discussion is, many of us Syrians right now are in diaspora actually, because we are caught in the middle of actually renewing these spaces in Syria, but at the same time preserving them. So how do you keep the Syrians, let's say, or this generation who actually has a lot of potential of providing for Syria, and they have a lot of hope that they can change in Syria, but then we can actually, let's say, hold them back a little and tell them to calm down, that we need to preserve some and we need to renew some. So how do you hold the people working on the ground to not, let's say, how should I say this? To not actually go beyond their boundaries, but rather stay in the middle, you know? So the word negative heritage is the first time that I think I'm hearing of it, and during my school days and my work. So yes, I would like your input on how to, let's say, direct these young architects, these young people who want to work for their country, and help them to actually not go extreme in renewing and not go extreme in preserving. So yes, I would like your input, Omar and Emmanuel. Thank you.
I guess you are talking about Dr. Tammo.
Yeah, I
sorry.
get that. It's fine.
Yes, sorry.
It's okay. Emmanuel, shall I go first? Okay, thank you. I mean, the key points in here for me, it's basically by raising awareness of the negative heritage. And again, I can't come up with one standard. There is no way we can come up with one standard to deal with different cases. Every case, you see, will be dealt differently. In certain cases, I'll go with preservation and maintaining this kind of stage of whatever we're talking about. If it's a building or if it's a public space, you see, I'm going to maintain it exactly as it is because I want it to be an evidence. I want the people to come and hear. If I give you an example, I'll talk about, for example, Sidnaya prison in Damascus. I'll keep it exactly as it is because I want people to come and see how dark were these rooms, how cold were these rooms, and then they will have that feeling of the space. So basically, I'm telling them the sad story of the inmates, the prisoners who were struggling over there. Even I will leave the walls as it is because I want them to read what's left on the wall, because the message in the wall, it's the last message from a human being to their beloved ones. So it's quite important to maintain this. And of course, that's one case. In other cases, for example, you see, if we're going to talk about a massacre, for example, people who were shot and killed, maybe I'll approach this differently. Maybe I'll build a new wall and add their names. Maybe I'll kind of create a statue. So raising awareness and, you see, I would say diversity and customization. I can't go with one standard. One standard is just creating a sausage machine that will end up with pretty much same thing that will be copied in everywhere. I mean, the key things in all of this, again, I will emphasize this, is raising awareness. Go on, Emmanuel.
I'm, if possible, even more than 100% agree with Professor Tammo. Raising the awareness is actually the key point. I'm completely agree with him. I, moreover, would like to say that I particularly appreciated his speech in his lecture because he, in a way, he completed what I tried to share with you in a few minutes. I appreciate that, according to his point of view, and I agree with him, we are dealing not just with the mere conservation of the building or the fact or the negative heritage or the cases that Professor Tammo mentioned a few moments ago, but we need to design this kind of negative heritage, design with new architecture building, new memorials, new statues, and moreover, and this is actually a specific field of interaction and competencies of the architects to in order to raise this awareness, probably even if hypothetically speaking we just preserve the building, which is of course very important, that's maybe not enough. We need different strategies to communicate the history and the legacy of the place. It's true that these two parts, these two halves, are both mandatory and very important. Preserving the tangible matter and design the best strategy to communicate and to raise the awareness about the past. Or the trauma or the difficult legacy that are actually connected with that place. Previously, I mentioned this case study in the cemetery in Mostar, and I'm really a Bogdanovich enthusiast, and Bogdanovich was super sure that the building, or the architecture, and the memorials will be enough to communicate the feelings to the human beings, because he designed for human beings, not about beyond parties, beyond religion, beyond ethnic, everything. But unfortunately, maybe it may be true for his period regarding memorials, but now that the places suffered a war, tragic war like the one in the 90s in the Balkans, this action, brutal action of destroying I told you about, well, we have new legacy, unfortunately, difficult ones, but we should find out the best strategy to raise this awareness, or through the communication, or through new building and new architecture, or the both, of course. Thank you so much for your question.
Thank you, Emmanuel. Thank you, Tammo. And I really appreciate your answer. They were very straight and informative. Thank you. They answered all of our questions. Just one request, please, I think to Kafa'at or to Wissam, or even to Emmanuel and Tammo. If you can share with us the slides of your presentation and the resources that you mentioned for Birgit Witch, you mentioned. Yes, we would like to read more about him, and you too, Tammo. We're really excited to read more into this. Thank you all.
Thanks, ma'am. Okay, other reflections or questions? So في أي أسئلة تانية أو إضافات قبل ما ننتقل لدكتور صلاح؟ Okay, Dr. Salah, it seems. Okay, let me stop it from my side. طيب. طيب دكتور هلا أنت معنا.
Good evening again, back, and hopefully now you can hear me here. I don't know. Hopefully those who were listening to the translation, I didn't miss so much or make a lot of mistakes. I don't know if anyone was listening to the translation, but hopefully we tried. Unfortunately, one of the problems in Syria that Zoom is not easily used, so very few have the accessibility to connect and join. But we tried to provide the possibility for understanding and reaching the majority, even those who face some problems in direct listening in English. For me, I think, again, thank you for the presentation. You covered almost all the topics, and I don't want to take a lot of your time. But let me start my talk with asking mercy and pray for all the martyrs who are still falling in Syria, and all that, unfortunately, this negative heritage is continuing, created day by day. As Dr. Emanuele said, that we have multiple layers now, unfortunately, like the case in Mostar and other examples, when we have the civil war and the First World War. So we have a multi levels and multi layers. I would like to, since it is covered mainly about the methodology and also the examples, I would like to talk from my part of, let's say, field of research, which is the management of this heritage. And for the management of this heritage, let me share the screen if I can. Let's see, it was here. This is the screen. You can see, no?
بالوقت اللي عم يشارك فيه دكتور صلاح، بس بدي أشير إنه بعد الإنجليزي رح يرجع يشرح الأفكار الرئيسية بالعربي مرة تانية، بما إنه حاليا ما في ترجمة.
Sorry for speaking in English. I will tell shortly this in 5 minutes, and then maybe we can tell for those who were listening to the translation, we can present it again in Arabic. So since when we discussed in the last meeting, there was a meeting 10 or 12 years, 12 days, not years, 12 days ago with Professor Moretzi and Professor Tammo and Wissam, Mr. Wissam, together to organize this third step, by the way, because this is already we had two previous. One spoke about the values already of the negative heritage. Then we spoke about the representation of this negative heritage from the point of view of art in the second meeting. And today we wanted to speak about the architectural perspective. As for me, as an architect, I feel dimensions. Usually, we know when we design, we speak about 2 or 3 dimensions. We have the plans, we have but we have here multiple dimensions. And in order to answer these multiple dimensions, we spoke about the 3 main topics: the documentation first, the recognition of this heritage, and the valorization of this heritage. And for me to be also answering the question I think Ms. Maha asked during the discussion about the standard or the way to do that, and the answer was there is no standard. There is no standard, but I think we have a methodology which narrow what to do or how to deal with each case by case. If we follow it, it is a common one. You know it. I'm not inventing something. It is answering the famous questions of the 5 W's and 1 H. Finally, the idea is how to deal with this negative heritage, the question, the $1 million question. But in order to answer it, in my opinion, first I need to answer those main questions. What to document, what to recognize, what to valorize, who or to whom I need to do that. For example, when we are speaking about documentation, if we will document every detail, including the stealing of because for me, when they stole the furniture of my house, for me, it is a negative heritage. It is a painful heritage. When they demolished only the slab of my roof to take the steel from it and sell it, it is a negative heritage for me. So every case, and we have different levels. So what to recognize, what to valorize, for me, what is important maybe on my personal individual level is different from the local level, the community level, national and international, as have been mentioned during the presentation before. So very fast, I'm asking questions more than answering them. And I hope that whenever we are dealing with any case, how to deal with it architecturally in Syria, to ask these questions, ask ourselves these questions. As much as questions we ask and we try to answer, I think it will be more clearer. For example, when even talking, you said, what is negative? What is painful? What is shameful? What is dissonant? What is dark? What is difficult heritage? We need to have the definition, and unfortunately, this is a new, even the terminology in Arabic is a new. So part of these workshops aims to achieve the goal of what they mentioned of raising the awareness. So you have on the right, I think, very famous photo, the Temple of Bel on the right, and in the upper one before, and in the bottom after ISIS exploded it. So what to consider a negative heritage, and this mainly we are talking today about the atrocities. I believe that about the bad events related specifically with the people, with the community. It's a representation architecturally and connecting the event with the place, with the memory. Altogether, this paradox creates the painful heritage, which we all can, after documenting it, we can valorize it, we can recognize it. So who should do that? Who did that? and to whom it's important. So we need to have a classification of these different types, different levels of heritage. Who should document? For example, if I'm asking about the three main pillars, we said documentation, recognition, and valorization. When we are speaking about who should document, is it social media? What we see, the publishing in the last 3 days and in the last 14 years about the atrocities, and later we discover it's a lie, or the vice versa, that something happened and we have nothing about it. All the people, or should be specialists who should deal? Yes, every case. When I take a case by case and study it and ask these questions, I think we can develop a better. By the way, this is a documentation of the atrocities, the massacres in 2019 in Syria. Who did it? And this is, and where? In the different areas. So to whom it is important? For example, they mentioned Saydnaya. I understand that Saydnaya, or Tadmor, as you see here, the prison of Tadmor, which is more hard, I think, from Saydnaya, but because it was erased. And this is why we need to document, why we need to recognize, why we need to valorize. Because firstly, not to forget. We need not to forget, because when we forget what happened in Tadmor, Palmyra, we got Saydnaya, and when we forget Saydnaya, hopefully we'll not have Halab or Homs or other places, but it is important that not to forget. And when we don't forget, we can recognize really, and we can have a classification about what we can do with this and why we are recognizing this, because the people will feel partially relief that they are valorized. Their pains they have passed through, the people themselves. Maybe I wasn't tortured in Saydnaya or Palmyra prison, but I will be feeling also recognized if the others recognize, because we are feeling, we in Arabic we have the poetry لا يؤلم الجرح إلا من به ألم, which says that the cut or the pain doesn't hurt except those who felt or lived the pain. Those can feel it, only those who lived it. So no, actually it is possible that we feel it and recognize it even on international level. And part of why the answer is to maybe achieve the reconciliation between the different communities. They mentioned the case of Rwanda and other places where the part of the reconciliation was the recognition of the atrocities, also South Africa and so on. When should I do the documentation? When should I do the recognition and valorization? Directly when it has happened, or I need to be more careful about receiving these documentation or valorization, recognizing the atrocities or the heritage? Is it for future, or as they mentioned, to connect the past with the present, to be prepared to transfer it to the future? For example, in Syria, should we focus now only on the last 14 years, or we have 57, 58 years, at least 58 years of the Ba'ath ruling and the Assad ruling of the country, and maybe we can find every place is a negative heritage or dark heritage. Where here it is a question, where is the site where I should document, where I should recognize, inside itself, or I should transfer the documents to an archive, or the other examples like museums. When I understand these dimensions and I ask these questions, I believe that it will be the strategy slowly becoming clearer to work and decide what I should do. Because if we will say every place, so in Syria you will find every place a negative heritage. So that means everything will stay? No, we need, as mentioned, that to rebuild the country, not to forget, but also not to stop the development and the progress of the country. So how I don't want to, you have seen a lot of examples, as Dr. Tammo mentioned, it is about telling the story of the event, the atrocity connected to the place or to the building, because sometimes the negative heritage is done not only to the people, to the community, but it is to the buildings. And we have a long time ago a concept of the herbicide, killing the cities itself, the genocide for cities, the buildings. And I think now we have culticide, the genocide of culture itself, the culture of some ethnicities, of some sects, of some religions, some ideas. Of course, you can have memorials, you can have signs. And here maybe you don't agree with me, but I want to mention a long experience by maybe not appreciated a lot of in Syria because the political tension, but we need to mention that the Shia sects, actually, I don't want to speak in sectarian, but Iran, in their exporting of the revolution, they based on the story of the painful heritage that the Hussein alayhi salam lived, and it was represented in all the shrines, maqams, in all the places. And recently, maybe if you remember, maybe 2 weeks or 3 weeks ago, we discovered that, and there was a big, again, march or manifestation, because they were saying that there is a maqam of a Alawi scholar was demolished in Halab, in the Hanano military base, Qishla Hanano. So, but when you check the resources, you find that nothing connected. So how one important, very important, in my opinion, rule that the intervention shouldn't create a new reason or start a new cycle of possible new negative heritage. Doesn't have the potentials of creating a new conflict, which will lead again to this painful, dark heritage, hopefully. That's it for me. I hope that I didn't take a lot of time, but I tried to summarize very fast everything they mentioned. And thank you for listening. If you have questions, I can answer it. Let's stop sharing. So أي حدا حابب يسمع اللغة الإنجليزية ولا الأمور تمام؟ أظن كل الموجودين العربية عفوا، كل الموجودين أوكي بالإنجليزية، يعني المتواجدين في الاجتماع. إذا في حدا في فراس تفضل.
قلنا بالعربي بالله معلش ما فهمنا الإنجليزي.
هذا سؤاله. ما بعرف، فراس ميكروفونه مغلق، ولكن I don't think
الله يعطيكم العافية.
الله يعافيك يا رب.
الصوت مسموع هيك؟
نعم.
Okay, I will speak in English. I would like to ask about like the tunnels of Jobar, if you know about them.
Yes.
Are they a negative heritage or a positive heritage? How could we really preserve them if they were positive heritage that needs to be preserved, or it's important to tell the story about many people who lived there, struggled there, and have very strong memories there. Thank you.
Just I can ask for clarification. Why were they used, Firas? It's about the use, how they were used.
Jobar was surrounded for about maybe 5 years or more. And the people there lived into these tunnels, struggled, faced the forces of the regime forces. And they were living even with their families there. So they survived there.
Should me answer, or if you want to intervene, Mohammed? Or
okay, I'll go first. They are part of the heritage. You could say part of the negative heritage because people living in under the ground, you see, fearing for their lives, trying to escape the horror of the war above the ground. Whether I keep them or not is a matter of safety now, coming from a professional background. I might kind of keep one, you see, and of course, I need to bring in other professionals in here because we need to check the structure integrity, whether it's safe to keep it so the people can come and down and visit, have the same feeling, but I don't need to keep all of the tunnels. I'll give you an example. It's like coal mining. So Europe had loads of coal minings pretty much in every country, but now they're not in use anymore. So some of them are kind of, you see, blocked. Others, maybe certain elements of it, maybe the upper part of the coal mining was used for tourism. You see, internal tourisms for kind of, you see, we do have what we call the Black Country Museum in England. And it's basically, you go to the Black Country Museum, it's not only the mine, it's the mine, the housing, the surrounding, the whole environment, but you go down in certain kind of layers of the mine, you go under the ground, and that will give you the feeling of a coal miner who will actually stay there for 8 to 9 hours. And then there will be examples where they sit, how they eat. But now people go there to remember the struggle of the worker. Okay, and then at the same time, because you buy a ticket, it is invested in the neighborhood, so the area itself. Yeah, that's me answering the question. It is part of the heritage. It is part of the negative heritage. But to be honest, I can't keep all of them because it's a matter of safety for the people going under the ground. 1 or 2, maybe. But I still need a designer, an architecture intervention to make a kind of an exciting journey. So it need to be an element of excitement over there. Maybe I'll keep record voices of a struggle, record voices of bumping above the ground, and give the people the feeling of being under the ground, running away from the horror of the war.
The problem that the people who are now having the need to go back to their houses and the whole place is destroyed, they are not thinking at all about these tunnels and their value. They are thinking only of rebuilding their houses, and that means to destroy all the tunnels to go deep to make the foundations for the new buildings. So building the awareness for these people is something that really needs to be worked on. Thank you.
I would like to have a question to Dr. Emanuele about the example he mentioned when what is aspired from the strategy and what the actual result. Sometimes we design and we try, and finally, again, the perception of the people who we designed for them, they don't like it, or sometimes we have opposing opinion. It is impossible, in my opinion, to satisfy all. So in the cases you studied 200 cases or you analyzed, usually how much the percentage of satisfaction of the communities, if you measure this in your study?
Yes. Yes, that's true. I would like to take advantage of regarding trying to answer to your question, and also finding a link with the previous topic we just mentioned of the question of Firas. I think the crucial point is about time. Actually, even beside that, it's true. Professor Tammo mentioned this many times that we have no specific one solution for all the cases, and you say that of course we have our methodology. But sometimes the best solution, even in this balancing between the matter and the symbol, should be defining in time. Firas mentioned that actually people, of course, can't nowadays recognize the value of, or maybe they can recognize, but they're just not interested in the value of the site because, of course, they have something more important to focus on, and it's fine. But also to find this balance, you asking me about, also the topic of time is actually the matter, and I think it's something that we should take in consideration to also to apply the methodology. And I don't know if I properly answered the question, but
Yeah,
actually
that's what I wanted to define. One of the questions when I asked the question, and the
Yes.
answer yes here, because as I believe we have again a atasus in Arabic, a proverb, which says that the pain with time, the time passed, the pain becomes smaller and
Yes.
smaller, and you start
Yes.
to forget, and more people, so it remains only directly the people who are affected.
Yes.
So the documentation, it must,
Yes.
maybe it should be urgent, but thinking about, I think, to satisfy or to respect the majority of the community opinion of remembering, forgetting, maybe forgetting, not remembering even.
Yes.
It is an important idea, I think.
Yes.
Thank you. But did you see any case which draw your attention specifically for that the designer or the idea was great in your opinion, but finally it wasn't received by the community that great? It was opposed a lot. I don't know.
Yes, I think that well, this actually opens to a quite long debate, I guess,
Yes.
which is actually about the role of community and the role of the architect, because everybody knows that many times we talk about participatory design, involving the communities, but I don't know if we already discussed about this specific topic. But according to my opinion only, I deeply believe that the involvement of community is not just important, maybe mandatory, moreover in negative heritage, that's for sure. But at the very end of the day, the architect should be in charge. I mean, the architect can't just be someone that just do what the majority of the community or the people suggest him to do, but is actually not a creative action, maybe not creative is maybe too much, but a scientific action through the design in order to translate the community intention in an architectural design, architectural idea, architecture interaction with the place. Sometimes we just have the second part, translate something that comes to the designer's mind or approach, which maybe it may be an interesting strategy involving art, for example, that may work, but maybe it's not enough because actually they overtake or they miss this passage of involving community and having the synthesis work at the very end of this engagement or involving the community. To be honest, I don't know. I don't have anything specifically in my mind. If you ask just a specific case, I have to think more about this. But for sure, it may happen that sometimes you also, if you check the history of few spaces, sometimes the stakeholders find out to have funds and money to do something. To not to lose the memory of the place, so with a very good purpose, but they just actually not randomly but in a hurry, and they find out maybe the best sketch, but not maybe the best strategy to enhance the memory of the place of this negative heritage, to keep to share also again to raise the awareness of the place in the community. For example, this I try to explain this very briefly, but maybe Europa Nostra is an international organization, and every year, Europa Nostra identified 7 more endangered sites in Europe, of course, because it's actually mainly based in Europe. That's the reason why they are focusing themselves in Europe. And in the past year, they also elected or inscribed in this short list of 7 most endangered sites, this cemetery I talked to you about several times now. This gives them, beside this international attention, because actually this list is just order to point the international attention on the risk of this loss of legacy, of heritage. And so Europa Nostra provide also a minimum amount of money just to find out the best solution to keep, not to restore the building. That's not enough. It's just a few, not so much money to do it. So not enough. But they work with lights. And so they, in cemetery, in Mostar, they worked with these lights. It was fine, but actually it works for a couple of months and that was over. So not enough to work on the memory, but more just to establish something more temporary exhibition through lights. Maybe not enough. That's it.
Thank you. I just asked this because when preparing this, I was reading a very interesting paper saying, can we love Nazis? Because the people, it is a paper about the dissonant heritage of the Nazis in Finland. And the work of the architect make it that like a treasure hunting for the people to have the tourists to show it like a lovely experience. So the intention was something, but finally the community, it was a very hard response for this. So this is something we need to also, I think, to not only raise the awareness between the people themselves, but also between the architects when we are dealing with this type of heritage.
Maybe
thank you. Yes.
That's why, Professor, involving the people, the stakeholders, is the most important thing here. Like for the design, for the acceptance of the design. Like Firas asked about something, maybe people should decide. People who use these places should have the upper hand to decide how they should be dealt with, I guess. Aisha wants to ask a question. Aisha?
Yes, Assalamu alaikum. First of all, I'd like to thank all the professors. And I'd like to ask a question. Do you think that there could be a change in the way of designing houses, or maybe especially the government buildings? In other way, or in other words, let me ask that, how can the negative heritage in Syria affect the design way or the design method from an architectural perspective?
Design of everything, Aisha, or specific buildings?
Maybe especially the government buildings.
Governmental buildings. Why do you think that it should affect it? Can you say more about why you think it might be affected? Just to make the question clearer. Maybe
the ex-government, let's say, that the main causes of this negative heritage, maybe.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Well, okay.
Yeah.
I'll try my best, Aisha. And again, it's subjective, but if you want my architecture and professional opinion, it depends on the architects and the case study itself. So if we're talking about public building, governmental buildings, maybe I could use one element of the negative heritage and integrate it over there, but I will be driven by design for unity rather than division. So I'll try to bring all of the different sects, both sides of the wall together in the building, which is basically I value what the presence, and then I honor the past, which is basically I tell we went through dark days. I'm going to use all of these sad stories and divisions to create a united front in a public building. But if you're asking me about housing, well, housing, it becomes kind of a more social element. I could be driven again by one side, one element, one sad story to design. But I don't want the people to forget, but I don't want the people to live in the past. So part of acknowledging negative heritage is moving forward. You see, using the tragedies, atrocities, sad stories, but again, establish the foundation for a better future through, you see, community engagement, participatory design. If I refer to Wissam's comments about giving the community a role in decision making, and of course, it's part of this kind of consultation process for the design. Yes, I could use it even in housing, but whether I want it to segregate or unite, personally, I would go with the unite, and I go to, you see, rather give the people the opportunity to move forward rather than being trapped in the past. Thank you.
Also, one comment, one of the papers I worked on was about people's preferences after what we went on in Syria, that before the uprising, living underground was something, let's say, somehow gives you miserable feeling, But during the uprising, it became the safest place. So, like, even this change of mentality that happened of that negative heritage, it was safer. So that's why people would prefer to live like ground floor or even down. So maybe this can also affected people. Like maybe Aisha talked about governmental buildings. The most famous building in Aleppo is the governmental building, the highest building in Aleppo that we waited for ages.
بلدي.
We waited for ages to be built, and then it became a source of death. Snipers. And even like one in the first workshop we had here, someone suggested that the last floor, which was used by snipers, should become like a museum, like become like let's say representation center. People should go and visit that place to remember that the government sometimes can use the buildings that are supposed to like be to help people to kill them, so that will not be repeated again. And maybe this is what Aisha wanted to highlight on that. The relationship between people now and governmental buildings, it was so bad over the last 14 years.
I mean, that, yeah, thank you, Issam, but that will take us to the initial starting points by acknowledging, yeah, government buildings are being built to serve the people. So as a citizen of Syria, that should be your building. I know there will be elements of security, elements of, you see, accessibility, but it's your building. Whether you're going to use the whole floor to, you see, remember, integrate it, it's absolutely fine. But the whole idea is it's a public building. It will serve a purpose. It's multifunctional, so it won't affect that building if you add an extra function. Of course, mixed use is always the key kind of an approach now for architecture design. Yes, if you actually can document and answer all of the questions that Salah has mentioned in his presentation, and you have all of the names who were fallen by snipers over there, yeah, of course, I'll create you see, and a statue, a memorial elements for them in that top floor. When the people visit, even if they're going for a kind of, you see, business, they still can read and go through the stories of the other people. It becomes part of the building. So it's here, yeah, we will never forget, and it's part of the building.
So in this case, maybe not changing the design, but adding functions to it. Okay, thanks. Any other questions or reflections?
Before saw Dr. Dilsiz wanted to, he turned on his microphone and camera, then now again off. I don't know if he would like to. Welcome, Hojam.
Have a good night.
Thank you, Hojam.
I wanted to talk a little bit actually, and I wanted to ask a question, but the dimensions of the presentations of dear professors are a little bit different actually. I thought some aspects, some dimensions would be also considered, since I think that actually both of them. By the way, first of all, I want to thank for your presentations, for you all. and I learned a lot about the negative heritage, and most probably I had a better understood tonight when I listened to your presentations about the issue. I want to give a small example which is discussed in the previous years related with the earthquake related disasters. You know, in 1999, we had a very large destructive earthquake in northwestern Turkey, Marmara earthquake. And recently, just 2 years ago, we had another earthquake in the southern Turkey, which is also had a huge destruction in Syria as well, the Kahramanmaraş earthquake sequence. For both cases, several times and many discussions, the research activities were done related with the establishment of some earthquake-related museums, which should actually emphasize the importance of the reducing the risks, reducing the vulnerabilities of the buildings, actually, all in our cities. But after all, in the very short term of the recovery, generally these kind of issues actually are not considered as the primary issues of the recovery activities, and then it is actually forgotten. At the end, for example, if you go to the southern provinces, I think most probably we cannot find anything actually to use or to save it as the negative heritage, which should actually highlight the importance of reducing the risks actually for the earthquakes and understanding the important issues related with this one. There are some also some very good examples. As far as I not misremembering, one of them is in Southern Korea, I think. Another one, Dr. Tamo also mentioned during his presentation, maybe in Japan, the atomic case, and also the other examples given actually during the presentations. These are good things, but I don't know, for the short term, for the midterm, or for the long term, how could we manage these issues? And the most important thing that I am wondering nowadays, because of the very, very hot conflicts actually, which is being felt actually in Syria, could we use such negative heritage to overcome the conflicts, which is actually asked and forced by the big guys, let me say. So is it possible? And thank you very much again for this very nice the workshop, these presentations tonight, and thank you all again.
Wissam, your microphone is off. Thank you, Dr. Abdullah. And before we answer, I think Dr. Emanuele time ended and he needs to leave. Sorry for keeping you that time. Yeah.
No, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to apologize. Actually, at 9 p.m. they close. Salah Ismail and Abdullah Dilziz, Professor Abdullah Dilziz, they know very well. We have the pleasure to work in this castle, but actually at 9 p.m. they close. Moreover, today is also a more complicated story because they are shooting a film here, so it's even more complicated. But anyway, thank you so much for having me, and thank you so much also for Professor Dilziz for this question, which opens also a very important connection with in the difference between natural disaster and man-made disaster. Me and Professor Salah, of course, we wrote a book years ago about destruction and the idea about natural disasters and man-made or war disasters. So this actually gave us
sometimes, unfortunately, the same effects, but very different kind of perception regarding the heritage, because of course the ruins or the outcomes of these different situations are actually different indeed. So yes, but yeah, thank you so much also for having me and for this opportunity. I'm sorry if I escaped from the office, but it was the alarm sounds, and so thank you so much indeed, everyone, and thank you so much. And of course, I'm open to sharing the presentation, and for all the questions, I can share my email if you want to. I would be more than honored to answer more questions. Thank you so much, and thank you so much, Professor Tammo, and everyone involved in this workshop. Thank you so much indeed.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. We appreciate it, and hopefully we will meet soon again in other activities. And,
yes, I wish that this is, we are already working on the topic, so I really wish that we may have more meetings quite soon, more meeting, and go on with our debate. Please count on me.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Answering Dr. Dilsiz, actually, I might give a very short answer, then Dr. Tammo can provide other examples. Actually, yes, some of the, as we said in the presentation, it depends on the level. When we are speaking about the level of the conflict or the level of pain or negativity in the heritage, some are basically could be reconciliated or solving the conflict by just recognition. A lot of people, they are not asking for even transitional justice or final justice. We met, and I have spoken with a lot of people that they just want that their pain and the torture they lived to be recognized, and they say, اذهبوا فأنتم الطلقاء after that. So they forgave them, but just recognize, not even erase what we have passed through. So some of the cases are possible. Even what we studied with Wissam in the massacre of the river, the people that they wanted just to have the names and the memorial, or to remember the beloved relatives who collected from the river, but they were not even, when we discussed, and it was very hard, maybe because it was at that time still very dangerous, they were not asking for an investigation or finding who did that or going to have revenge. Maybe now changed, I don't know, especially with the new situation. But finally, there are some possibilities. For example, in Rwanda, the memorial and the tomb of the skulls of the people, they were coming, the killer and the family of the killed person, sitting, confessing, and then solving. Of course, is it by force? Is it by culture? Is it by raising the awareness? I don't know. At least in Syria, for now, because the time is very important, when in Syria, for now, I don't believe it's possible. So to solve or make a solution of the conflict, to forget these issues or to decrease the conflict, but not to increase the level of rage of the people, at least we need to document and recognize. This is my opinion. On the long term, as you mentioned, maybe on the long term with the new generation, they will start forgetting the direct pain, but they need to remember what happened. Like what we see, for example, the new generation in Balkan. Yes, they know that in the 90s there was a war and they were killing each other, but now they are going together to the same university. Maybe there are some still tension, but I think, yes, with the long term, it will be solved.
Well, I guess it's my turn now. Yeah, thank you, Professor Dilsiz. Yes, I think natural disasters are negative heritage. Well, and again, as I said, every case is different. In this case, maybe the political will was to rebuild the cities and compensate families. But however, it doesn't mean that we forget the fallen ones, the people who passed during the earthquake. there are different ways if you see honoring this tragedy by creating kind of a memorial for them. And I'll give you an example. You see, if you visit Ireland in Dublin, you will see a memorial. It's about the famine that happens in 1890 something. And even Irish people still remember that the Ottoman Empire sent them ships of aid to Ireland. But what created is, you see, statues of, for example, a mother with an infant, a group of people all immigrating because of that famine. So that's to, you see, remember the people who died during the famine, remember what happened. It's a tragedy because they blame the English. So for them, it's part of the history, and they still honor the value of what happens over there. I guess similar things could happen in Turkey to honor or remember the sad stories of the people who passed during the earthquake. It's possible. If they didn't keep anything that an outcome of the earthquake, they could come up with a memorial, a statue, or even kind of, if they recorded voices, it could run in public spaces, remind the people of that, you see, tragedy, and remind the people of the 100,000 people died during the earthquake. Going to the Syria case, I believe reconciliation is possible. I disagree with Salah. So reconciliation is possible, but reconciliation won't happen with a murderer. There is a murderer and there is a soldier. The murderer is the person who's given order, planning to, you see, either for ethnic cleansing or kind of mass murder. There is no way that you can reconcile with this. This should go to the court. But again, I'll give you an example of Rwanda, for example. You see, a wife who probably lost her husband. The husband was a farmer. But however, part of the reconciliation process, when they identified the murderer, they brought this man to the wife. So they asked the wife, what do you want? And she said, my husband was a farmer. The farmer used to farm the land, walk in the land. I want him to walk on behalf of my husband in the land. So the bright part of the story is that she got the justice that she needed. She maintained the income for her children and family. She stayed at that house, and that murderer would carry on work for her and support for the family because he was the reason behind losing her husband. Yeah, thank you.
I think this is a worse than killing. So torturing for life, I don't think this is a reconciliation. No, it is for joining. But yes, of course, there is the possibilities. But I'm thinking for Syria now, after 47 years, 54 years, it is harder than Rwanda. Rwanda, the civil war, how long it take? And I don't know. Maybe you are more,
you see, you could refer back to your religious heritages in here when the Prophet Muhammad entered Mecca. The first things that he said, he's actually said, "Ya adhabu antum tulaqa." You could use certain example if you're, you see, religious, cultural heritage. You see, al-afu 'inda al-maqdira. There are a lot of things that you could say, but first you need to start the process of justice. You need to identify the murders. The people need closure. They need to know who killed their families. Then whether they forgive or say no, send them to court, for example, that's entirely to the family. So it doesn't need to be a positive outcome at the end, but it's a part of the reconciliation process. There is a comment on the chats in here. Dalia, yes, of course you can wrap the old building. It's part of the adaptive reuse, by the way. It's part of dealing with existing building. You see, wrapping is one of the intervention in architecture design, and peeling is one of architecture design. And if you read about, you see, communisms, I visited Bucharest in 2000, and that was the era when they're actually trying to get rid of all of that brutal architecture, communist brutal architecture and city center, and they wrap it with all kind of high-tech steel and glass materials. You could do the same with any existing building, as long as you keep the building. From a sustainability perspective, demolishing is not a solution. Repurposing and adaptive reuse is the solution for it.
Thanks a lot. I guess we almost run out of time, and it's Ramadan. We want to keep you any longer. So just one final comment, Dr. Dersis. Earthquake, the last earthquake, from my student, they look at it, the negative heritage is the man-made one, the rescue efforts. When they talk about it in a class, my students usually they talk negatively about the rescue efforts. They remember it in a negative way, unfortunately, not the earthquake itself. So it's also, yeah, after all, you taught us in the master about preparedness, the risk. When there is no preparedness, it becomes more. So it's, after all, it's a human-made disaster. The earthquake itself wasn't the disaster, but not being ready is the negative heritage out of it, right?
Of course, I disagree with this idea. Of course, it could be understood and felt by the children, the school children in this way, but it is a result of the huge destruction at the end. If you check the numbers, the total number of rescuers actually reached up to 30-something thousand people, the persons I mean, and the total number of the collapsed buildings itself was also equal to this number, 35,000. This means that the search and rescue teams were not, and it was not possible to be enough for reaching all those needy people at the same time, unfortunately. It is very sad to say this, but at the end, this is the result. If the destruction was not that much huge, if the structures were not actually collapsed completely at the end of the earthquake, that much need was not actually come into the picture at the end, and it would not be the need, of course. But at the end, the preparedness and the other things are also important. As I give in my lectures as well, maybe you remember, maybe my other friends remember in this way, we were aware that there was a seismic gap in Kahramanmaraş in Eastern Anatolian region, but the most of the plans of Turkey were done according to this information, according to considering the seismic gap in Kahramanmaraş, but we have not considered this large, very big earthquake sequence on the same day, and this much large destruction, unfortunately. But of course, the children feel what they lived at that moment, of course.
The negative heritage is what people feel. I guess this idea need to be more delivered to them so that will reduce the negative they feel.
Sure.
After all, heritage is
Of
what
course.
people believe is heritage. Okay, thanks a lot for everyone. Thanks a lot, Dr. Tammo. Thanks a lot, Dr. Salah, Dr. Dersis, and Dr. Emanuela. He had to leave. Thanks a lot for everyone who attended. I hope it was informative for everyone. I hope now no one was, I guess, intending to give answers. What we need more is now questions. And yeah, thanks, Maha, also for your participation. Firas, Aisha, thanks everyone. We don't want to keep you any longer. شكرا جزيلا لكل من حضر. آسف إذا ما كانت اللغة العربية مقدمة بشكل الكافي. المرات القادمة بيكون في تركيز فقط على اللغة العربية بحيث إنه تكون المعلومة واصلة بشكل أفضل. Good night. See you inshallah in a coming workshop with more productive ideas like these ones.
Inshallah. Thank you very much.